Jiu Bin determinedly calculated and finished dealing with the Jiu family's affairs. It was Lang Van Fong's turn. Jiu Bin had returned to the living room of Nen Nu restaurant villa. He pulled the curtains to admire the outside scenery. Trong Hu Boy flew over and worriedly asked Jiu Bin, "Were you okay alone?" He turned back and replied firmly, "Yes, don't worry, stay in the underworld and don't go out. As long as nothing happens to me, it's the safest place." She still did not stop worrying and continued to fly after Jiu Bin. He was sure that Lang Van Fong would attack today. Jiu Bin sat down and judged. Tomorrow was the last day of the 10-day agreement. Tonight he had no chance to do anything. Trong Hu Boy hesitantly spoke, but before she could finish her sentence, a bullet flew through her head, causing her to freeze in panic. Her figure scattered in surprise. She screamed loudly and then bent down and hid behind the sofa. Jiu Bin stood in front and quickly ordered, "Hu Boy, quickly return to the underworld." Trong Hu Boy quickly made a noise and then disappeared. The door outside the balcony was pushed open, and two figures walked inside. It turned out to be a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. The boy holding a slingshot ready to shoot again. The girl holding a paper bag in her hand, spinning around. The girl told her brother that the radar had no response. It seemed there was only one demon from before. The boy scratched his face and replied, "The owner said he was very powerful. I thought the female ghost raised by him would be very strong, that's all." Suddenly, the girl's penis lit up with green fire. The little girl quickly warned her brother to be careful. The boy suddenly turned around and looked at her with just a gasp. Then Jiu Bin threw a kick and dropped his weapon. The little girl saw her brother being hit and was startled and motionless. The two children screamed and fell with a bang. Jiu Bin crossed his arms and interrogated. "Lang Van Fong sent you guys here. Where is he? Does he just want to make the turtle shrink its head?" The two children rubbed their heads and complained in pain but could not stand up due to Jiu Bin's preemptive attack. In Nen Tan Villa Quan, the boy was holding his stomach, complaining of pain and trembling on the ground. The other girl stretched out her arms to block him. "Stop, Jiu Bin, brother, don't come over here. If something happens to us, the master will absolutely not forgive you." Jiu Bin opened his eyes wide, sat down facing the girl. "Child, I asked you, where is Lang Van Fong?" A figure appeared at the door. "Even if you're angry, don't torture an immature child. If it's good, aim at me." A beam of purple light flashed out. Lang Van Fong swung a punch. The smoke quickly dispersed. "It was just a ghost flower. It also wanted to hurt me." Jiu Bin stood up straight and looked out the door. After learning a lot, he replied, "Of course, I have never underestimated my opponent." Jiu Bin smiled coldly at him. Lang Van Fong opened his legs wide. His hands clenched. His luck. He could do it in a few short months. From an unknown person to becoming a guest of several big families in Binhai. Is it all based on this yin and yang digital transformation? It's a pity that you met me today. Jiu Bin discovered that he used golden light to protect his body. Lang Van Fong had a golden light technique to suppress the negative soul. Lang Van Fong threw his fist at Jiu Bin. He shouted loudly to see the move. Jiu Bin waved his hands and released the golden porridge. There was a loud bang. Kim Chung porridge was punched to pieces by Lang Van Fong's trick. "Obediently hand over the command card. I can forgive you." Jiu Bin's eyes widened in surprise. He jumped up to avoid Lang Van Fong's attack. After that, he immediately fell to the ground. Jiu Bin quickly threw several paper talismans at him. The flying talismans touched Lang Van Fong's body and automatically caught fire. He laughed at Jiu Bin. "Ha ha ha. Doing something meaningless." Two henchmen appeared from behind the wall to cheer him on. The master tried his best. "Beat him to death, beat him to death." He rushed to throw a punch at Jiu Bin, but he jumped aside to avoid it. He jumped a few steps away from Lang Van Fong. When he provoked him, he could only run away. Jiu Bin thought the paper talisman was useless. The yin bottle could not defeat him. The golden light protected his body to overcome the devil's tricks. Suddenly he thought clearly, smiled confidently, restrained the demonic energy. "Got it, I understand." Jiu Bin stood up straight. Lang Van Fong laughed at him. Why didn't he run anymore? He pulled out a pen and a book of life and death. "Lang Van Fong, come here. I'll show you the treasure. Lang Vanfong felt suspicious, something strange. He had to immediately control Du Bin. He jumped up and rushed towards Du Bin shouting. Standing still, he held the book of life and death and jumped back, quite sharp, but unfortunately. A loud noise rang out outside the room. Dust flew, wood and glass shattered. Du Bin landed on the roof, too slow. Lang Vanfong stood on the ground looking at Du Bin above. He shouted loudly, no longer pretending to be a god or a ghost. I told you, the yin and yang magic book has no effect on the golden light body. Du Bin warned him, be careful. Purple smoke slowly flew out from his mouth. Lang Vanfong jumped up high. He discovered that behind him, a large cable was shooting out, the end of the wire emitting sparks of electricity. The rope swept past Lang Vanfong's body. He leaned to avoid it. He jumped down from above and the rope also fell to the ground winding like a snake. Lang Vanfong asked Du Bin, what did you do? Du Bin put the force on his hand, smiled and said to him, Lang Vanfong. He once heard a saying, called, as I said. I punched Lang Vanfong. King of Hell wants you to die in the 3rd hour. Who can keep people from coming to the Southern Watch? Du Bin's main force rushed close to Lang Vanfong and quickly dispersed. Seeing this, he told Du Bin, old god pretending to be a ghost, you only need to hand over the command card and you can live, but now I've changed my mind. Okay. His internal attack has increased, now I want your life. Suddenly his foot kicked a banana peel on the ground and he slipped. Lang Vanfong fell backwards. He glanced behind him at the sharp ends of the gate fence. He immediately spun around to avoid it. A hand grabbed his neck. Du Bin grabbed Lang Vanfong's neck from behind and pointed it at the sharp end of the iron bar. The iron bar pierced Lang Vanfong's chest. Fresh blood flowed along the iron bars, dyeing the ground red. He lay face down on the ground, raised his head slightly to look at Du Bin. Snot and mucus flowed out of his mouth, stammering, you. Du Bin stood in front. Lang Vanfong put his hands in his pockets and arrogantly told him that he only worried about using Kim Kwang to defend against my yin and yang magic. Did he forget that I'm very good at fighting? Blood was flowing on the ground. Ha ha hu master. Lang Vanfong was seriously injured lying on the ground. His 2 henchmen knelt on either side. Hu. Du Bin told them, don't cry anymore. I've revised the book of life and death. Brother, I won't die. The 2 children immediately stopped crying but their whole bodies were still shaking. The boy immediately helped Lang Vanfong sit up. The girl whispered, Master, take it easy. Lang Vanfong is still holding on. Yes, even if you kill me. He coughed. The position of master must definitely belong to about our Lang Jia. The wooden token appeared in Du Bin's hand. He sighed. He threw up the order card, telling the truth. I have no interest in this position of leader. Lang Vanfong stood silently, holding his wound. The boy saw the token. He jumped up and wanted to grab the token in Du Bin's hand. He discovered him. He punched him in the face. He flew far behind Du Bin, falling to the ground. He raised the token, but the more he forced me, the more I didn't want him to get what he wanted. Understand? Lang Vanfong put his hand in his inner pocket. I understood. He took out the token and put it in her hand. I'm rude and shouldn't underestimate you. Take the token and go. I am willing to admit that you are the leader of the North China Alliance. The girl raised her hands to receive the token and called out to the owner. The little girl silently placed the token on Du Bin's hand, and he praised her, knowing that she knew how to stretch. He turned around, raised his hand to command, don't let me see you again in the future, go back to Triet Dong. Lang Vanfong opened his eyes wide. His hand shot out a hidden weapon towards Du Bin. The dark aura collided with the golden porridge around Du Bin, and it fell with a clang. He turned his head angrily. Lang Vanfong, he was really looking for death. The girl immediately knelt down on the ground. Du family calmed down. I immediately took the owner away. You, don't be angry. Du Bin shouted loudly. Go away, at the Mac family, in a room with many bonsai trees. Du Bin placed the token on the table. Old man, this is for you. Mo Tantong was surprised. He really wanted to give up this position as lord. Du Bin told him to stop joking with me. Even the properties in my name were given to Elder Sao's recommendation to manage. The Northern China Alliance is so big, I can't manage it. He spread his arms and shrugged. I just don't want Binhai to fall into the hands of the Lang family. I myself have no interest in this position of leader. Mo Tantong immediately seriously picked up the order. If you say so, I won't pretend to refuse anymore. He gave the order to La Suyen. That's right. Ti Gao's body is better. Do you want to go visit her? He happily agreed. Okay. In Mac Ti Gao's studio, she is coloring the picture she drew. The door opened, the voice of Miss La Suyen. Let's see who came to visit you. He smiled and greeted her. Ti Gao, she happily called. Mr. Diu Bin. La Suyen smiled and refused. Miss, then I won't bother you two anymore. La Suyen smiled and left the room. Mac Ti Gao pulled Diu Bin's hand out of the room. Mr. Diu Bin, let's go sit on the terrace. On the rooftop, Mac Ti Gao took out a tower of cakes and put them on the table, inviting Diu Bin. This is what I made myself. Diu Bin, please try it. Beautiful and colorful cakes, Diu Bin exclaimed. Wow, you are so amazing. He took a bite of the cake. His eyes widened in surprise. Oh, so delicious. Wow, the taste was so delicious. Ti Gao lamented. There was no other way. Since the last time something happened, Grandpa and the four girls didn't let her go out anymore. She could only stay at home playing the piano, painting, baking. She was bored to death. Diu Bin advised her. The old man thinks about your safety. After all, that guy has not found your father yet, so it is difficult to guarantee that he will not do anything to harm you again. I ate all the cake. Mac Ti Gao had a gloomy spirit and a sad face. In fact, when I was little, my father was very good to me. My body was not good and I was always in the hospital. He often took care of me. She had tears in her eyes, but later, after my grandfather said he wanted to leave all his assets to me, I could feel that he had changed. Even though he was good to me, he also had calculations. Diu Bin comforted her. Ti Gao, don't be too sad. Suddenly, Mac Ti Gao slapped her face. She immediately brightened. I'm fine, don't talk about these unhappy things anymore. I heard the fourth lady say that you received the admission notice from the Supernova University. After getting the plus points, do you want to continue studying domestically, or go abroad? Diu Bin looked at her with wide eyes, listening to her say, if we went abroad, we could both study at the same school. Diu Bin raised his hand to lift the cup of tea. He turned his face to the side. Ti Gao, you're right. I should plan the next thing I want to do. He turned around and asked Mac Ti Gao, you have been out of school for more than a year. When will you return to school? She answered. The fourth lady did not say. She looked down at the table, but a few days ago her grandfather had asked her two uncles to return to Benhai. I guessed that she wanted to complete the property transfer this year, and then after that, she could go back to school. Diu Bin asked her, this year. She looked at him in surprise, asking what? He replied faintly, I have to go away for a while, please stay at home obediently during this time. If you are bored, ask the four girls to buy you toys. Wait until I solve all the complicated things. Maybe I can go abroad with you, we can go to school together. Mac Ti Gao angrily puffed her cheeks and stood up. What kind of toy did you buy? You're not a child anymore. Banged her hands on the table. Diu Bin patted her head. After listening to you and not buying toys, she calmed down. Oh well, that's fine. In Nen Tan Fu, a voice spoke up, residing in the meditation area. It was Master Ho reciting the incantation, his mind at peace. He was casting the spell, and suddenly small purple smoke fell out of his palm. They fell into the water. Diu Bin walked over and saw smoke rising from the water. Master Ho, what are you doing? He also saw you. Diu Bin's nest. Master Hu winked and explained to him. Trong Hu boy is after all a demon. Of course he has a system. He is not afraid. But his mother and Trong Hu boy's mother are both ordinary people. This demonic weapon needs to be purified. Apart from. In an instant, Diu Bin clicked on the system and took out the incense burner. There's no need to be so complicated. Burn this incense vase. Hold it up and walk around to let the scent spread out. Diu Bin called Master Ho. Come with me for a moment. I have something important to ask for your help. The two entered the study room. Master Ho asked Ju Bin. He wanted to meet Kong-sun Tran-yan. He seriously replied, I need to find him for something. Can you help? Master Ho hesitated a bit. I can really use my identity to send a greeting card. But Kong-sun Tran-yan doesn't know me, and we have different backgrounds, so he may not agree to meet. Ju Bin immediately said it's okay, then help me write a card. If it doesn't work, I'll think of another way. Dipping the brush into the inkstone, Ju Bin stood and looked at Master Ho, who was seriously writing a card. I think Trong Hyu Boy can't keep living with me forever, but with her current situation, I'm really not cruel. He immediately decided that, because of his previous love, he would help her with this last task, helping her and her mother find a peaceful place to settle down. In the VIP waiting room of the plane, there was a knock on the door. Ju Bin was sitting looking at the phone and called out, "Please come in." Le Suyen pushed the door open, causing trouble. She wore a dark t-shirt and short skirt, clasped her hands together, and apologized for making little Ju family wait so long. Ju Bin put one hand on the chair and leaned forward to look at Le Suyen, who was Miss Nun. "Why are you dressed so beautifully today?" She immediately waved her hand. "I have to check the stores later for the old man. Let's change into an outfit that's easy to move in. Can you stop teasing me?" Ju Bin looked at the phone screen again and asked. Someone was rioting. Le Suyen explained to him. Now the old man has the master's token in his hand. Everyone outside wants it. But it's all a small problem. Lang and I can solve it. Right now outside the group door. Chief Lang put on a cap and walked in. He was carrying a large cloth wrapped with a rope. "Little Dujia, the things you needed have already been delivered to you." He threw the wrapping on the ground, and a head protruded from the mouth of the bag. Ju Bin was startled to realize that Master Lu had been beaten until his face was swollen. He pointed at the guy, turned to ask Le Suyen, "He's dead." She covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. "How is that possible? I didn't forget your instructions." She left him a breather. She raised her hand to make a sign, but there was only this one breath left. Ju Bin gulped. "Haha, you're really bothering the four ladies." Le Suyen and group leader Lang walked out the door. She waved at him. Group leader Lang turned around to greet him. "Little Ju, if there's nothing else, we'll leave first." Ju Bin looked after him, scratched his head and smiled. They looked like a perfect match. In the bathroom, there was the sound of rushing water. Master Ho let out a sigh of contentment, rubbed his stomach, opened the door and walked out. "Phew, I'm dying of urination." He was startled to see the scene on the floor. "What is this?" Ju Bin immediately pulled the mouth of the bag over Master Lu's head. He tied the bag tightly and smiled at Master Ho. "Hee, it's nothing. It's a meeting gift I intended to give to Kong-sun Tran-yan." Master Ho secretly thought, "At that time I had to hide a bit. Otherwise hide. Kong-sun Tran-yan catches fire and will implicate me." The plane takes off into the sky. "Let's go." On a road full of trees on both sides, Ju Bin asked Master Ho, "Are you sure Kong-sun Tran-yan lives here?" He replied, "Yes." In front of the two of them was a row of spacious houses. Ju Bin wondered, this is clearly a motel. Master Ho turned around and explained, "It's the 21st century. Yin and Yang magic can't make money anymore. It's normal for people of Yin and Yang to want to have their own business." The two doors were pushed open, making a clicking sound. A woman with a towel wrapped around her head, holding her hands in front of her, walked out, gently welcoming guests. "Welcome to the Van Sun death page case. How many people in total? Whether to eat or stay?" Master Ho placed one hand on Ju Bin's shoulder, one hand pointed at him, and said to the woman, "We came to see Director Hoang about business." She smiled widely, raised her hands forward. "So you too. Do you have an appointment?" Ju Bin and Master Ho unexpectedly turned to exchange glances with each other. With a bang, the stack of money was placed in the woman's hand. "The two of you, each holding one of the woman's hands." Ju Bin put money in her hand, "Without prior appointment, but we did have a job. Sister, can you help me a little?" Master Ho also placed the card in her hand. "This is a greeting card, I'm sorry." The woman smiled, put the money in her pocket with one hand, and looked inside the cemetery with the other. "My little brother knows how to talk. come in here. Inside the mausoleum, the woman walking in front showed the way to Ju Bin and Master Ho, asking them to go this way. The two of them looked out at a table of guests sitting outdoors nearby. A female guest is broadcasting live on the phone. Everyone, today I'm live from Vu Van Sun Tu Trang. Ju Bin turned to Master Ho and praised that this motel's business was also good. He immediately said, of course. Vu Van Sun Tu Trang is a famous tourist destination. Entering a large room, the woman introduced herself. This place is the main hall. You two wait here first. I'll go in there and ask. Inside Kong Sun Chanyan's office, there was a knock on the door. Kong Sun Chanyan was feeding the fish and inviting him in. The woman held the card in both hands and respectfully held it up. General Hoang, there are two people outside, saying there is something they want to see you about. He opened the card and read that he was a member of the Yin-Yang sect. He folded the card and said to the woman, a few years ago I stopped caring about things in the world. Tell them to go home, don't come and bother me. She held out her hands in front of her, wanting to receive the card back. Yes, Your Excellency. Kong Sun Chanyan let out a loud gasp and stopped his action of giving the card to the woman. He stared at the card in his eyes. There was an aura of an unfilial girl on the card. In the underground wine cellar, the elevator squealed as the people in the elevator stepped out one by one. Following the woman, Ju Bin and Master Ho looked around. Stored a lot of real wine, the woman reminded. The light in the wine cellar was not very good. Be careful at the foot of the road to avoid falling. Suddenly seeing her stop, Ju Bin was surprised and asked why. She fainted and fell backwards. Master Ho quickly caught her and Ju Bin called out, Sister, sister, what's wrong? The voice came from the room at the end of the cellar. She's okay. Just sleeping. Come in. I'm inside waiting for you. The woman is fast asleep, breathing evenly. Ju Bin squatted down and let her sit on the wine barrels. Master Ho, you stay here and take care of her. I can go in alone. The sound of the door opening clicked. Ju Bin pushed the door and walked in. Inside was a large room filled with wine bars. Kong Sun Chanyan sat on a chair. You guys have arrived. In front of him are 2 bottles of wine and 2 glasses of wine already poured. He pointed to the chair and sat down. Ju Bin walked to the chair opposite Kong Sun Chanyan. He sat down and pointed his finger up, asking who he was asking. Kong Sun Chanyan picked up a glass of wine and answered Ju Bin. Who else is there? Of course that unfilial girl. He looked closely at the glass of wine in his hand and saw him shaking the glass, the wine inside swirling. Ju Bin took out an envelope and gave it to him. This time I came here to tell you that Aunt Hoang's daughter was murdered. He remained silent, his hands trembling, his face stunned. Kong Sun Chanyan opened the letter to read. As he read it, he frowned. Ju Bin looked at the phone in his hand and glanced at him. On the system board, in the goods column, he clicked payment. His hand was filled with yellow powder. He sprinkled it towards the unpainted man. He placed the letter on the table and angrily slammed his hand on the table. Well, at first he didn't listen to me and was determined to run away because of a man. Now, who can blame him for not living a good life? Ju Bin put his chin in his hand and asked him, haven't you thought about finding Aunt Hoang these past few years? Kong Sun Chanyan left the letter in the envelope. He grew up by my side from a young age. He couldn't learn anything else. But his ability to hide his whereabouts is not bad. The beautiful fragrance around him still sparkles in gold. He raised his hand to raise his glass of wine. For the past 2 years, I've asked a few friends in the world to help me find him, but there's been no news. Who would have expected it? Looking at Kong Sun Chanyan, he put the wine to his mouth and gulped down. Ju Bin propped his chin in thought. The fragrance of his tongue did not change color. Proving that he was telling the truth means that because he asked someone else to find Aunt Hoang, he revealed Hugh Boy's identity, leading to his own murder. After drinking half a glass of wine, he blew out a breath. He looked sharply at Ju Bin. You spread incense ashes on me. What do you want to do? He was startled. When did he find out? Kong Sun Chanyan crossed his arms and said nonchalantly, if I can't even see this young student, then my yin and yang jutsu of decades will be as good as thrown away. Du Bin immediately raised his hands to explain to him that incense ash was very normal, just wanted to confirm a little. Are you a person worth trusting? Kong Sun Chanyan immediately told him, you don't need to say this, if anything happened to me, you would be dead by now. Du Bin closed his eyes, clasped his hands in front of him. Okay. Actually everything had to be said a few months ago. The clock ticked, time gradually passed. Du Bin told Kong Sun Chanyan everything. That's just the way things are, he complained. Why is he so stubborn? Clearly, if he just admits his mistake to me, I will help him. Du Bin gave his guess, perhaps Aunt Hoang, like him, was waiting for the other person to take the initiative. Kong Sun Chanyan turned his head in another direction. Don't suddenly bully him. Juniors like you are not good enough at teaching me. Du Bin confusedly scratched his head. Yes, but he thought to himself, how arrogant. He blew out a breath. Du Bin struggled to think. Then he raised his hand and proposed to Kong Sun Chanyan. Do you want to meet and understand each other? In the room at the basement of Kong Sun Chanyan, Du Bin sat opposite him. He shouted out loud, and immediately a white smoke appeared next to him and gradually accumulated. In Kong Sun Chanyan's eyes was the figure of Trong Hu Boy. Appearing in the white smoke village, Trong Hu Boy also discovered Kong Sun Chanyan. She bowed slightly and greeted him. He trembled and pointed at Trong Hu Boy. His appearance was very similar to him. In Du Bin's hand, an hourglass appeared. I could only let Hu Boy go out for 10 minutes. If you had something to say it quickly. He placed the watch on the table and sand began to fall. Kong Sun Chanyan covered his face with one hand and sighed. We'll talk about the past later. Let's solve the problem at hand first. He turned to ask Trong Hu Boy. He heard Du Bin say, those people killed you because they wanted to turn you into a living corpse. Is what he said true? Trong Hu Boy bit her lip, then she said strongly, I don't really understand this. But I can tell you what I encountered. Absolutely not to lie to you. The sand has almost run out. Trong Hu Boy ends the story. Everything is like that. Kong Sun Chanyan crossed his arms and seriously analyzed, listening to his son. Then what Du Bin investigated must be true. Trong Hu Boy looked at Du Bin. The time has come. You have to return to the underworld. He turned his head to look at her and agreed, yes. At this time, the sand in the clock had flowed out and the white smoke flew away. Kong Sun Chanyan took out his pipe, lit the cigarette, and refining living corpses was considered a forbidden technique hundreds of years ago. Unexpectedly, there were people who violated the rules in order to live forever. Du Bin asked him, how do you plan to resolve this matter? Kong Sun Chanyan sat cross-legged, holding a smoking pipe in his hand. I haven't cared about these things for many years, and the other person has money and power. It's not easy to solve. If that ungrateful girl returns, I will protect her. If she doesn't, she will be in Bin Hai and I won't be able to help her. Du Bin clenched his fists and stood up. He looked at him coldly, not expecting him to be such a weak and incompetent person. Aunt Hoang doesn't need his help. In honor of Hu Boy, I will protect her. He turned around, put his hands in his pockets and walked towards the door, saying goodbye to Kong Sun Chanyan. I'm sorry. Large centipedes suddenly appeared, crawling from the room door towards Du Bin. He immediately stopped walking. Kong Sun Chanyan shows his power to Du Bin. I haven't let you go yet. Kong Sun Chanyan tapped his pipe on the table. The cigarette butts fell. He picked up his pipe again. Kid, ever since you came here I've noticed, your strength is very chaotic, not like a disciple of any sect. Du Bin turned around, his face full of caution. What does this have to do with you? He waved his hand, releasing a whirring dark weapon towards Du Bin, very arrogant. Du Bin immediately stood in the pan to support himself. Dark air soared towards the needle. Kong Sun Chanyan laughed at Du Bin, being naive. The dark aura throbbed through the needle and pan. Du Bin opened his eyes wide in surprise. He immediately put his hands in front of him to block the hidden weapon. The needle in the pan was broken. Du Bin grumbled that he despised him. Secretly attacked a junior like me, without shame. Kong Sun Chanyan sneered coldly. You hold Trong Hu Boy in your hand. Isn't it because you want to use the secret technique of living corpses to create immortality techniques? It's not your turn to teach me yet. Ju Bin immediately refuted his words. I don't have it. He stood up, his whole body exuding murderous aura. He kept these words to explain to the king of hell. Ju Bin performed the judge's edict. There was a loud banging sound outside the door. Kong Sun Chan Yan. I am the 42nd generation disciple of Yin Yang Man. Ho Nyat Dang. I have something to say. Kong Sun Chan Yan stepped on the ground with one foot to create momentum. He rushed towards Ju Bin. A loud explosion rang out. The door burst. Ju Bin and Kong Sun Chan Yan glanced coldly. Great Master Ho rushed in and hugged his leg, causing him to fall on the ground, shouting Chan Yan loudly, be merciful. Kong Sun Chan Yan handed out the pipe in his hand and angrily shouted to get away. Knowing that the pipe was flying over his head, his face was full of sweat, but Master Ho still said loudly, I will guarantee Ju Bin, if Chan Yan does not feel secure, he can sincerely plant the ancient poetry in me. The pipe almost reached his head and stopped. Kong Sun Chan Yan quietly looked at Master Ho. Master Ho let go of Kong Sun Chan Yan's leg and stood up. Hun Yan, I am willing to sincerely plant the ancient poem to ensure Ju Bin. Kong Sun Chan Yan stroked his beard as he said, sincere poetry has been lost for decades. Does the Yin Yang sect know this? Master Ho glanced at Ju Bin and answered him, of course I don't have this ability, but Ju Bin can. He immediately raised his hand. Snapping the cup, two ancient worms appeared on his palm, one black, one white. He threw the white-necked worm towards Kong Sun Chan Yan and told him to come and take it. He reached out his hand to catch it, truly clearing his mind. Ju Bin's hand held up the black-necked worm, a genuine product at a real price, not deceiving anyone. Master Ho stretched out his hand towards him. Ju Bin gave the snake's neck to me. He opened his mouth and put the ancient worm into his mouth. Master Ho was panicked. Oh, what are you doing? He gulped down the ancient worm. Ju Bin raised his hand to wipe the corner of his mouth provocatively. Kong Sun Chan Yan, don't you dare. He held up the GU worm. An hour after drinking the Qingxiu Company, I could keep asking you, if you lied or had something to hide, your intestines would burst and your death would be very unsightly. Ju Bin smiled, I'm not afraid, what are you afraid of? Kong Sun Chan Yan silently swallowed the worm. He let out a sigh. I admired your bravery and wisdom. I sat down and said again what you just said, starting from the time Hu Boy was kidnapped. An hour later, Ju Bin talked too much and was so thirsty that he was bringing the toad to his mouth to drink water. Master Ho testified for him. I investigated the backgrounds of those guys and was able to verify what the little Ju family said, but the person behind hiring them couldn't be found. Ju Bin put the glass of water on the table. He seriously told Kong Sun Chan Yan, I sincerely wrote the poem just to prove my innocence. It doesn't mean I agree with your way of doing things. I will not take back my previous words. Ju Bin stood up, put his hands in his pockets, called Master Ho, let's go. Master Ho turned to look at him and called softly, Ju Bin. Suddenly a hidden weapon flew towards him. He quickly blocked it. His two fingers clasped 3 needles. Ju Bin turned to question the true man of the mountain, what do you mean? He closed his eyes, holding a water toad in his hand, this is my reward to you. He opened his eyes and looked at Ju Bin. These 3 needles represent 3 wishes. You can find me at any time. Standing in the elevator, Ju Bin thoughtfully looked at the 3 needles. This Chan Yan Kong Sun really likes to color, how can he help me? Master Ho nudged him on the shoulder, that might help. If you want Trong Hu Boy to come back to life, you must have Golden Lotus as a conduit. As far as I know, Kongshan Chan Yan has this. He put the 3 needles into space, glanced at Master Ho, and said yes. In his room, Kong Sun Chan Yan looked at the photo frame inside. Suffering so much outside, won't he come back and bow before him? Suddenly there was a knock on the door. A voice rang out from behind the door, the master, the young master of the Trong family came to give a greeting card. He left the photo frame on the bookshelf, warned the person outside the door, told him to stay and wait. I would see him tomorrow. The photo frame is a photo of him and his daughter together when they were young with bright smiles. Ju Bin and Master Ho were outside looking at Vu Van Sun Trang too. Master Ho asked him, "Do you really not need help from Kong Sun Chan Nyan?" He replied firmly, "That stubborn old man, his bravery is not good, his temper is still hot, I don't need it." Suddenly, a well-dressed fat boy stood and waved his hand at the two of them. "Go away. Good dogs don't stop people." Behind him were 4 tall bodyguards wearing black suits and dark glasses. Jew soldiers mocked him, wondering if someone's pig was not locked up carefully. How could they let it run into the street like this? He angrily stomped his feet and cursed, ordered the bodyguards, dared to scold my uncle, took him back to me, and beat him to death. The bodyguards rushed up to surround Ju Bin. Master Ho stroked his beard and tilted his head to whisper to the fat boy, "There will be a murder." He then pouted and laughed. There was no time to ask for forgiveness. The only way to anger me was to die. Master Ho told him again, "I said those bodyguards of yours will lose their lives." He frowned and looked at him. Huh? A fist was thrown at a bodyguard. The powerful force of Ju Bin's attack caused him to fly far away, hitting the rock with a loud bang. Another bodyguard hugged Ju Bin from behind. "I can hold him, you guys hurry up." Even though he was hugged tightly by the latter, Ju Bin still easily jumped up and kicked another bodyguard. The other poke-headed bodyguard threw a fist at his face. He tilted his head to avoid it, causing the bodyguard holding him tightly behind them to pick his teammate's fist and fall back. Ju soldier grabbed the wrist of the head guard, heard a cracking sound, and the man screamed in pain. 4 bodyguards were lying on the ground. Ju soldier turned to the fat boy, "Damn fat pig, it's your turn." Ju Bin slowly approached the fat boy. He was scared, his whole body trembled, but he still kept his mouth shut, "Daring to hit my people. You, do you know who I am?" Ju Bin grabbed his collar, he slapped him across the face. He used his hand to cover the cheek that had just been slapped. "You hit me." He immediately slapped his other cheek. Ju Bin grabbed his collar tightly. "I'll hit him if I want. I need to choose a day." He kept struggling, shaking his head. His 2 hands grabbed my wrist. "You let me go. Hoo. Wait for my brother to come. You will die without a place to bury." Ju Bin raised his other hand. "Waiting for your brother to come. I will beat him too, because he has a useless brother." There was a short-haired girl and Kong Sun Chan Nyan appeared. She covered her face and shouted loudly, "Young Master Trong." Ju Bin immediately let go. The fat boy fell to the ground. She ran over and shouted to stop. She helped the fat boy sit on the ground. His face was beaten and swollen like a dumpling. He screamed in anger, "Vu Van Sun Trang bullies you. I will ask my father to kill all of you. Kill them all." Ju Bin smiled and took out a pill. He flicked the pill and hit the fat boy's mouth. He covered his mouth with his hand. "What will you feed me?" Ju Bin threatened him with poison, the kind that will kill him within half an hour. Hearing that, the short-haired girl told him, "Young Master Trong, quickly spit it out, quickly. He immediately put 2 fingers in his mouth and hooked his throat, constantly vomiting. Kong Sun Chan Nyan ordered her to take young Master Trong to the medical station to wash his intestines, and she immediately replied yes. She guided the Trong family's young master around. Ju Bin stood behind Kong Sun Chan Nyan and slyly explained, "It's just a medicine, it won't kill him." He replied, "I know. But the play must be performed to the end. Something like that cannot happen in Vu Van Sun Trang." He warned him that he was the young master of the Trong family in Fu Nam. "You should quickly return to Ben Hai. If you offend him, you will die." Ju Bin was suspicious. The Trong family was the Trong family, the leader of the black and white gangs in Fu Nam. Kong Sun Chan Nyan turned around and left, waved at him, prayed for his blessing, "Don't let them catch him." In the first-class cabin of the plane, Master Ho was wearing an eye mask and snoring, while Ju Bin was looking at his phone in his hand. The screen showed a conversation between him and Le Suyen. She introduced the image of young Master Trong. Ju Bin confirmed that the person he met was indeed him. She was surprised to hear that he beat him. Fearing for him because the Trong family was very hostile, He assured him that he would be careful and wanted to meet old Mac to tell him some news about the Trong family. She agreed to make an appointment to help him. Ju Bin looked out the plane window and said the classic words of the CEOs, "It's cold, it's time for the Trong family to go bankrupt." Master Ho suddenly stood up, pulled the blindfold off and asked him in bewilderment, "What did you just say?" He turned to look at him. "It's nothing, just go back to sleep." The plane slowly landed at the airport and returned to the resort. Ho Dai Master pulled his luggage in front and pushed the door in. Ju Bin followed behind and was on the phone. Suddenly, a kick from inside the stone door hit Master Ho and his luggage backwards. Master Ho was surprised and couldn't react in time. Ju Bin, who was on the phone, also froze. He immediately came over. Could it be that someone took advantage of the time he was away from home to secretly attack his mother? Damn it, why didn't the ghost soldiers react? As soon as he entered the door, he saw a fist thrown at him. He waved his hand to fight back, causing the other person to scream. He looked bewildered. Huh? Luong Tan Hoi shook his sore hand. "Ju Bin, are you back?" He grabbed her sore wrist and coldly questioned her. "Why did you even attack me in my house?" His mother pushed the door open and panicked to stop him. "Ju Bin, stop fighting. Luong Tiu too is here to help us." She smiled and soothed his mother. "Auntie, I'm okay. Just trying out martial arts." Ju Bin scratched his head, made an inviting gesture with one hand. "Come into my house and bandage it. What's going on? Everyone tell me." Luong Tan Hoi rubbed his sore wrist, coldly snorted. Master Ho was lying on the ground holding his stomach, watching everyone walk in. "Tiu Ju, did you forget I was still lying here?" On the balcony of the Sun Train Resort, Ju Bin learned about the situation, because people from the Lang family came here, wanting to take revenge on me, but as a result, she met me and rescued me. Luong Tan Hoi sucked at a straw and drank water while nodding. She remembered what her grandfather told her. He sent someone to sneak into Tiu Ju's family's vacation cottage. I was looking for an opportunity to have a good relationship with his mother. Don't worry, there's no way to approach him, she thought to herself. Grandpa, I really don't know what to talk to him about. Ju Bin sat next to Miss Luong. The two of them turned to face each other and pondered, should I say something? Ju Bin's mother walked in holding a plate of fruit. She had a hammy sandmelon to eat some fruit. She put the plate of melon on the table. She smiled brightly and said, "Thank you, Auntie." Then she thought to herself and sighed, "Finally, I don't need to be alone anymore." Ju Bin while eating turned to her. "Thank you so much that you not only protected my mother but also stayed here to be her friend. Now she wishes she had someone to be her friend by her side more." She raised her hands and waved shyly. It was a small matter, after all. Among the people sent by the Lang family, there was no one who was good. Ju Bin still held a piece of melon in his hand, probably because that guy Lang Vanfong couldn't swallow this anger, but he didn't dare to offend the criminal, so he could only send a few small-minded people to harass him, to regain some face for himself. The sound of the door opening was heard. Master Ho walked in. There was someone looking for her outside, Miss Luong. She turned around and pointed at herself, "Looking for me." He stood in front of me, looking out at her. I saw that Miss Luong's face was not good. What happened? After meeting a man, her expression became serious and she turned around and said to him, "My little Ju family has something to do first, so take care." He nodded bewilderedly, and she too, if there was anything difficult, she could tell me. Miss Luong quickly turned around and left. When she left, Ju Bin immediately dialed the phone to call the Kai family. He picked up the phone to his ear. "His Kai family investigated for me. Luong Hong's gang.